I really like this photograph here of how storytelling affects the brain. Kendall Haven has written several wonderful books about this topic and says that a story will activate parts in the brain that allows the listener to turn their story into their own ideas and experiences. It's called neural coupling. So when you look at this, you'll see that storytelling affects many areas of the brain. And when children are listening to stories, these areas of the brain are lighting up. And that means it's truly an interactive, immersive experience. So how can we learn a story? The most important thing I want you, teacher as storyteller, a leader as storyteller, to know: stories are not memorized. If you memorize a story, it's going to come out kind of strange and wooden and not with a lot of emotion or feeling. And besides, it'll be way too much to go into your brain. But you will know that story by remembering it, by practicing it, and remembering it enough that you'll be able to tell it. The most important step is to choose a story that you really enjoy reading, or one that has personal meaning, and you want a short story to begin with. You do not want a novel. You want 3 to 5 paragraphs of print at the most. That's why fables are a wonderful way to start, and or children's literature that does not have enough words in it, that you want it to have enough words in it that it makes a story. You don't want it to be disjointed sentences. Try to remember the beginning, middle, and end of the story. This is basic comprehension. You want to block the story by outlining the story details and the sequence of the story, or drawing a simple storyboard. I always teach the children to draw simple storyboards with stick figures, not an art project, that they can just delineate the story. This works great in history, remembering facts in history, and also sequences in science. So you want to commit the first and last 2 sentences to memory. And even any repetitive phrases. A lot of children's stories and folk tales have some repetitive phrases in them. If you draw your own storyboard that you use with the children, it's a great way for you to remember the story. And our English language learners need to see pictures, so be sure to include that. Retell the story in your own words as if you were an eyewitness to the story. Think about the characters. This is where you get to have fun. What do they look like? What kind of voices will they have? What movements will they have? And what kind of attitudes will they have? In The Lion and the Mouse, will the lion be a meek one? Oh, I'm just a lion. And will the mouse be bossy? Hey, I'm the mouse. I came here to help you, so don't give me any lip. Storyboards are very important for so many industries, for especially game creation, ad industry, movie industry. Storyboards are used. This one that I'm showing you is one that I made out of poster board. And the purpose of this storyboard is to help the teacher and students to pictorially represent the story sequence with simple drawings. And the key here is simple drawings. It's also a great way for a teacher to remember a story that you're trying to learn and tell to the children. So here we have the gingerbread boy, and you can see how simple my drawings are. How did I make this? I took poster board and I put grid on it of 6 rectangles. I laminated it. Then I found circular Velcro fasteners, and I used what worked best on here was fabric paint. the puffy like comes in the little jars, and it's stuck to the laminate surface very well. And so that way I can remove these pictures, give them to the students or mix them up, and then they have to put them in order again. So this explains to you how it can be made. Plus I use dry erase markers so it can be wiped off and reused over and over again. After we've done this a few times as a whole group, it might become a center for the children so that they create their own illustrations and then have to put the story in proper sequential order with the plot in mind. So what are some other applications that the storyboard could be used for? Remember, it's used as a visual prompt. The big one, of course, is for whole class use. But you can draw the sequence of the story on the storyboard and have students place them in correct order. You could add words, phrases, or dialogue bubbles as needed. The kids like to do this too. In collaborative groups, they can design their own storyboard and present their stories for math, science, or social studies. Children also can illustrate social emotional stories so that they can solve problems. You could give each group a problem to solve, and they could do so through storyboard, and then story presentation follows the storyboard activity. So where do we take it from here? First, they've orally told stories in the story circle. They then might have gone to their journals, but now we can incorporate the storyboard into writing because they have a format for their story now, and it'll be a lot easier to write, whether it's a story, whether it's historical facts, or whether it's science details, or even a math story. Yes, having a storyboard will work for that purpose. This is an example of a very simple storyboard. You could give each child a file folder, and as long as you have enough Post-it notes. When we're incorporating this storyboard for science, math, social studies, writing, and literacy activities, Post-it notes come in really handy because they can draw the sequence of the story this way and just use a Post-it note folder. And the file folders come in very handy for this. They can also play games with friends where they mix up their Post-it notes and then a friend has to come and put their story in order. This also helps them to break from memorization of a story to remembering, the true comprehension of remembering a story. So I use my storyboard as a way to break out of memorization. As I said, no story should be completely memorized. So this is a way for them to get all their facts. It's a great study guide too when they put it into storyboard. Here is an example of a student's storyboard. They have taken a literary story and I had them divided up in 6. Usually a story can be well told with just 6 little squares, or sometimes you can have them fold the paper so it's in quadrants. And when children or adults learn a story, it's good for them to draw simple sequential illustrations to move from rote memorization to remembering just the story. And remember, the idea is simple. It is not an art lesson. I use either black pens or black markers, the very thin ones, because I don't want it to become an art lesson per se, but they use these storyboards initially until they know their story really well. And it's great for you as a storyteller to do that too. Now you should go back to the slide that says, how do we become a storyteller? And go through all of the ways and remember the tools of the storyteller. Because now you need to practice that story. And you need to go through those steps of making your storyboard. If you make a storyboard, you can use it with the kids. And it's a great tool. Not only are you modeling the storyboard, but it helps you to remember it. Remember, we're not going to memorize every word. So to polish your story, you have to tell, tell, tell. A story does not become polished until you tell it at least 5 times in front of an audience. Analyze that story for your own personal worth, and even after a while, ask the kids, well, how did it work for you? What should I do to change it? Play with the audience reaction. You're modeling storytelling for the children, and the children will learn the story as you retell it. The children are going to love you being a storyteller in their classroom.